All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's Rocket League Clinic. Real quick, can you all hear me? If you can, please just toss a one or a yes in the chat box there. I had my headset muted somewhere last week. Perfect. Awesome. All right, so it is 4:01, so I think we'll probably just get going here. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll kick things off. Oh, not that one. There we go. Do it that way. Okay, perfect. So yeah, my name is Coach Prescott. I am the director of esports at Northwestern College in Orange City, Iowa. I'm really pumped for today's clinic, and to start things off, I'm just going to give you a brief overview, intro to our program, kind of who am I, who are we, what do we do here. Then we'll get into the meat of the clinic for Rocket League today. So a little bit about us. Esports at Northwestern is a varsity sport under the athletic department. We are officially recognized and supported by the college. We represent Northwestern in our competitions. We compete currently in Overwatch, Rocket League, of course, and Smash Ultimate. We are in our fourth year as a varsity program. We currently have 24 players on our competitive rosters. For us, we're very culture driven as a team. Competition is important to us. We're driven to grow and improve and to win. But toxicity is something we don't tolerate. We're tempered by solid culture. It's one of those things where for us, having a positive and encouraging and fun environment is very important. How we do things is more important than what we do, is a phrase we often use around here. And that kind of bleeds through into how we carry ourselves, both in competition, in the classroom, in just the relationships amongst our students. That's one of the things I really value about our institution and our program, is that our students regularly build deep and meaningful relationships with their teammates, with their coaches, with their professors that go beyond just competing in esports together. So our promise as an institution, as a team, is that you will stand out here, you will be known and encouraged, you'll be equipped for your career, God's call in your life, for success and significance, because you'll be a Raider and Raiders stand out. That's who we are. That's what we do. So if that's something that sounds attractive to you, if that's an environment that sounds interesting, if esports is something that presumably you love and enjoy, I would encourage you and would love to have you check out our camps. This summer, we're hosting our second annual overnight camp where we bring high school students to campus. You'll stay here for almost 4.5 days on campus to train and compete alongside other passionate students from around the Midwest with our coaches, with our teams. Would love to see you here. And if you're someone who's, interested in continuing to compete beyond high school, be happy to connect with you as well and talk about what that opportunity could look like for you here at Northwestern. So moving on from that, today's clinic, we're going to cover a good amount of things. I'm going to kick things off with just some esports fundamentals, and then I'm going to hand it over to Coach Wielinga to talk in depth about Rocket League. We're going to cover quite a few things, some from a high view, some a little more in depth and detail. This is going to be a little bit of a fire hose, and that's okay. So jot down the things, take note of the things that strike you hardest, that you think are most relevant for you today. We will record the clinic and send it out. So if you want to reference things back, don't be over worried if you miss something or don't fully understand or have what you're looking for in that regard. That's something we can keep working through. So today we're going to talk about a couple things. Tools for effective practice. I'll cover a little bit of communication basics, and then we'll jump into the fundamentals of Rocket League, and then questions that you guys submitted ahead of time. We'll answer a few of those, and as we go today, please feel free to drop more questions in the chat box. We'd love to hit up as many of those as we can. That's one of the things we love most about these clinics, is getting a chance to have that dialogue. So as you have questions, feel free to throw those in. So with that, let's hop right in. Esports fundamentals, right? How do you practice? How do you improve? How do you get better? The number one thing that I often run into with players, both in high school and players that are entering our program, is learning. You need to spend some percentage of your time, I'd say at least 10 to 20% of your time that you are committing towards improving as a player needs to be learning, right? Watching guides and pro coaching, looking up, stats and patch notes. Obviously in Rocket League, there's not a lot of change when it comes to that. Forgot to take that line out of the Overwatch slides. Talking to teammates and coaches, right? Doing VOD review, all things that have nothing to do with, putting your hands on a controller, but learning about once I put my hands on the controller, how can I do that effectively? Bleeding into that, or coming off of that is setting goals, right? If you cannot clearly answer and in detail the question, what am I working on today? Don't play the game. Don't boot it up. Don't pick up a controller. Answer that question first. It needs to be clear in your mind. This is my objective. This is my goal. This is the skill that I'm improving today. And that's why I'm about to pick up the controller, right? And I have an idea of how I'm going to go about doing that. So don't just play, practice, right? As you set goals, have 1 to 2 at a time. Don't overwhelm yourself by setting 10 simultaneous goals. You can't focus on 10 things at once. That's why goal setting is important. Battling autopilot, having a clear focus. You should have goals as an individual for yourself, but also before you sit down for a team-wide practice, have that conversation, right? Take the 5 minutes at the start of practice, go, all right, what's our objective for today? What as a team are we trying to accomplish? Or even if we're not going to set a hard like team goal, but we want to make sure accountability, we've all got individual goals that we're working on today, right? So have those in place. Um, it's really important. And if you're not sure of, what should my goals be, that's where that learning piece comes into play, right? If you don't know what you should or could be working on, chances are you need to spend a little time learning, right? Whether it's, again, watching guides, talking to teammates and coaches, or doing VOD review, which we'll get into a little bit later. Um, Moving off of that, again, the emphasis on this is really key, right? Lots of people play Rocket League for hours and hours and don't get that much better, or they reach a certain plateau and then they just sit there, right? So spend a little time learning, set goals, and focus on those goals while you play. I guarantee you will improve more quickly than if you just spend 100% of your time just playing the game. All right, coming off the back of that, let's talk a little bit about communication. I know Coach Willing is going to get into some more of this on the Rocket League specific end, so I won't talk for too long on this, but communication is critically important in esports, right? Good communication is one of the cornerstones of every great team, and bad communication will crush you before you even get going. So, what you say and how you speak is incredibly important in esports. And communication is more than just verbal, right? Your tone, your body language, desk slamming, right? Or other expressions of frustration. All of those have a massive impact on you and your team and how you perform. So, quick question that I want you guys to answer here. Toss these in the chat box. What do you think is the purpose of communication in esports, right? Why do we wear headsets? Why do we talk to each other? What's the point? To get better, so we don't double commit, so we're able to work as a team, so you can figure out who is doing what at what time, give your teammates information about you and opponents, keep on the same page. Yeah, right. A lot of good things here. A lot of good things here. Right? Two main components. One, build player confidence. When your teammates are talking to you, you know what they're doing, you feel on the same page. There's this sense of unity and confidence that gets imbued when you're engaging in whatever is normal, good communication for your team, right? And then number two, obviously provide valuable information that aids in your decision making, right? Not double committing, knowing where your opponents are, knowing what boosts are available on the field, things like that. Good. So with that, a couple communication do's, right? Really basic, simple to understand, and not always easy to do. So all your job as a communicator is to communicate relevant information and to communicate in a way that encourages one another. That's it, right? The don'ts, almost more important for most players. I feel like I see this especially at the high school level. Anything that is not immediately helpful or relevant to the current moment needs to be left unsaid. What you don't say is almost, it's just as important, if not sometimes more important than what you do say, right? Um, you know, coaching or correcting teammates mid-game, complaining about demos or boost or missing or just mechanics in the game, right? All of that distracts from the play. All that distracts from the focus. So say what is helpful, anything that's not immediately relevant, leave it left unsaid, or talk about it if it is relevant but not immediately relevant, right? If it's something that needs to be addressed, address it between games, address it after practice or before the next practice, right? Not in the middle of the game. All right, so that kind of, I'm going to skip past this. This is going to be answered by Coach Wielinga in the Rock League section. So speaking of, I'm going to introduce him real quick, let him take over and talk a bit about Rocket League. So Coach Wielinga has been our Rocket League head coach for about 2 years now. Under his leadership, we have achieved back-to-back conference championship appearances. We won the conference championship last fall. We got runners up just last 2 weeks ago, Friday. We've had some good success this year, especially. We, in addition to our regular season, traveling to a couple of tournaments, claiming second place at both of those. We've beaten some really good schools, teams that have beaten us in the past. We've improved beyond them. His ability to develop our players has been excellent. He's worked with players ranging from silver to top 100 in SSL. And one of our players in particular, right, came in as a freshman, hadn't played much Rocket League, knew a little bit about it, and was coached up from silver to hitting champ this fall. So about a year's time frame. So Coach Wielinga really knows his stuff. He's been great to work with. I'm excited for you guys to get to learn a bit from him today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And Clayton, I'm going to let you take over here and share your screen.
Yeah, Cole really hyped me up here a little bit. Can
Yeah,
everyone hear me
you
okay?
you didn't include enough hype in your own intro slides, so I had to give you a little love.
See. Okay, can everyone see this okay then? Hopefully this is popping up.
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, so Rocket League, how to succeed on and off the field. Obviously, Rocket League's one of those games like you're playing with the same people over and over, so you want those relationships to stay good. You want everyone to feel comfortable. If anyone doesn't feel comfortable in that situation, then obviously they're not going to play to the best of their abilities. So a little bit about me. Like Cole was saying, been coaching at Northwestern for the past 2 years. Been playing Rocket League since 2015. Started playing it on Xbox right when it dropped and fell in love with it. And then I'm usually sitting around GC2 in lobbies. So it's a little bit about me. So we're going to get into a bit of how to play Rocket League. So sit tight. So first off, before you even play, settings is super important. A lot of you have probably looked at your settings, but if you haven't, good way to do that is just to look up different pro players' camera settings. A lot of the pros, it doesn't like, there's not a ton of variation at the top level as far as what settings change. There's a few little small changes that you can do. This is one of those things like if somebody's having an off day that I tell them just to go into their settings, change it up a little bit, move it around, see what feels different. Just get comfortable with your settings and make sure that feels all right. And just play around with the different variations of settings, just find what's most comfortable for you. Same with controls. Obviously change from the default controls. They're okay and they're not too bad, and they updated them recently to make them more comfortable for people, but especially when it comes to like arrow right, arrow left, have one of those bound and then free arrow. Some of you might not use that, but don't be afraid to like change your controls, or even if you're in like champ. I know I changed my controls completely when I hit like C1 just because I didn't have drift on a particularly nice button for me. So I changed that up. So it's never too late to change if you do have like a weird setup. So as long as you find something that works for you. So how to play Rocket League, some of the three main components of the game as far as mechanics go. and then rotations, and then also mental. So mechanics, this is just anything having the ability to control and move your car how you want. There's tons of different mechanics shooting. It's one of the most important, but also the most underlooked mechanics. Like if you ask any pro, like what's the most important mechanic, almost all of them will say shooting. I think Sunless Khan did a video on this, and he went around and asked a bunch of them like, what's the most important just overall mechanic to work on. This is one of those things like you're not going to overtrain shooting. Like even at the top level, some of them they just miss open nets just because that's just what it is. Then also recoveries. This involves half flips. This involves jumping off of the wall, trying to wave dash. This involves if you get bumped in the air, just being able to get comfortable with like rotating your car in a different type of way to land, keep that momentum going. And then as far as dribbling, anything with like, there's different types of dribbling. There's bounce dribbling where you're keeping the ball under a bounce and then you're getting ready to flick it. Also flicking this, there's like, I don't even know how many types of flicks, but all sorts of different ones. Some of that you can't practice too much. Aerials, anything in the air. There's not going to be many games where you're not going to have to aerial. And also just being able to aerial off the ground, speed aerial, off the sidewall, from the ceiling. And then touches, also another super important thing. A lot of the times, like your first touch is what's going to make or break your play. And this is something that like a lot of people in training packs don't really practice very much because the training pack just sets up the ball a lot for you. So just getting into free play, getting those first touches in, making sure that it is what you want and expect. Pinches, not a crazy important part, but also can be a very underlooked part of the game as far as just getting in the game, practicing the pinches, just so you get comfortable, and then even being able to read pinches and seeing where some of those pinches are going to go and just getting comfortable with that. And then flip resets. This is one of those things that like most players over practice this. Like you really don't need to know how to flip reset until you're like actually SSL. You can hit GC3 without ever even hitting a flip reset. And most players do this just like they're bored, they pop into a game, they're going for them way too much. One of those things like it's fun to practice, probably not the most useful time to practice doing those. So how to improve mechanics? Obviously, free play training is probably the best way to improve mechanics. So just going into free play and just hitting the ball around, not even having like a goal of scoring the ball all the time, just hitting it around, trying to make sure that you're playing fast, try to speed your plays up, just trying to get used to how the ball is going to react with the wall, trying to get the different weird corner reads, if the ball is going down off the crossbar, different stuff like that. Free play is super huge for that. And also playing around with ones is also super important for that because in ones you get the most time on the ball and also the most time playing defense. So that's a great way to improve like basic mechanics that you might not even think about. Training packs is also a great way. It's very important not to just keep doing the same one over and over. I see a lot of players that they have like one or two training packs that like they just stick to that. And really you should think about like the worst training pack, like what's your least favorite training pack? And that's probably the thing that you need to work on the most in Rocket League. And then time, keep in mind that mechanics takes time to improve. So don't expect to just practice one mechanic that day and get it. Like people put hours and hours into this game and like still might not be able to do a mechanic. Like if you go and you're just trying to learn a half flip, it might take 3 days to learn how to do a half flip and get that muscle memory down. So don't be frustrated when you don't get it right away. So as far as rotations go, being able to play with your teammates, this is super important because you're going to be playing with the same three. And if you can't get your rotations down, your gameplay is just never going to get there. So positioning, rotations, passing, and challenges is all part of that. So there's two types of rotations. There's rotations, just like a normal rotation, then also positioning. So positioning we have here on the left side. So this is just like area of coverage on the field. So these circles represent the three players. They're on defense. Ball's on the left side here. First man doesn't have as much area to cover here because he can't because he's closer to the ball. And then the two people behind him, you have the second man on the top on the left here, and then third man on the back left here. So this is just more area of coverage. So if first man goes here, then he's covering that area, and then they're just covering areas instead of just like rotating through and through with each other. And then if you look on the right side, this is just like more your basic rotations. So first man, second man, third man, they're just kind of making this triangle, kind of keeping that shape. If as soon as first man goes, he either gets the ball or doesn't, then rotates around. And you just kind of keep doing this circle pattern. And this is more like if you're diamond or below, you should probably stick with just your normal rotations. Just make that consistent rotation. Try to get that faster. As soon as you get higher than like diamond two, kind of get up into the champ area, that's when you kind of want to do the area, and that's when like cutting becomes a thing. So as far as mental, this is one of those things that's really not talked about enough. Like if you watch a lot of YouTubers, as far as content creators and stuff, and like different Twitch streamers and stuff, they really do not talk about mental enough as far as like how that plays into a competitive Rocket League scene. So obviously coming to practice, having a good attitude, whether it's in person or online, like come there, be hyped, be loud. It's not very fun to walk into a room and everyone just kind of mellow. Everyone's kind of tired, just kind of sitting there, not doing a whole lot, just kind of chilling. And it's just not very fun to play with. And that really affects and like carries into gameplay. So also with that, not getting frustrated with your teammates can be really easy to get frustrated with them as far as like, oh, they miss an easy save. Like it's gonna happen. We expect it. Just making sure like not to show them, even if you are frustrated, just keep that to yourself. There's no need to like yell at them or let them know that you're frustrated. And then also with that, getting frustrated with yourself is also a big part of that. It's easy to mess up something easy, like you backflip when you're trying to go for an aerial. Obviously, as well, it's gonna happen. Just making sure not to get frustrated with that, and just keeping your composure in game. Slam a desk, like what Cole said. Like as soon as somebody does that, boom, the room gets quiet and everything just gets kind of awkward, and the vibe kind of changes there. And then also just make sure not to play on Rocket League on autopilot is a huge part. It's real easy to jump into a game, just kind of play around for a while, not really think about what you're doing, having that intention with the game. As far as what you want to do with the ball, where you want to go, it can be easy just to play around, not really think about the game too much, and just not really do anything with that. So communication is also very important. It's one of those huge advantages that you have over other teams, and it's one of the easiest things to change because it doesn't take that much time just to have better communication. So what things should be communicated. So your rotations, who's on the ball, who's going, when you're gonna turn back, when you're going back, when you're not gonna turn for the ball. Those are all things that should be communicated. So your timing when you're communicating is also super important. Like I'm waiting on one touch or I'm hitting once, I'm double committing. Like even if you are double committing, as long as you let your teammates know, like, hey, that third man, you're gonna be last for a little bit. So also your location with the, especially when it comes to like big boosts, those are like easy ways, like back left, back right, mid left, mid right. Those the six spots on the map are real easy just to like let your teammates know, have an idea of where you are. Because not the whole time, especially when you're behind your teammates, they're not gonna always know where you're at. And then again, we kind of talked about this, your intentions. So one touch, if you're passing middle, passing to the backboard, solo play, all things to keep communication positive, obviously. We kind of talked about that a little bit as far as don't get mad at like your teammates, don't get mad at yourself. Just keeping stuff positive inside the game. And then here's another important one is don't be a coach mid-game. Obviously, there's going to be things that mess up. If people keep messing up, that's something that maybe you bring up after practice or like talk about later, but there's not a time in the game if a goal gets scored to be like, oh, you should have been backboard. Like that's just not helpful. Then they're in their head and they're going to just play worse because of it. So as far as replay review, this is a big part of getting better at the game. So it's real important. If you can get someone else to watch your replay reviews, that's really important. Just because you get a new set of eyes on the replay, and they might see stuff that you don't. If you can't, the solo VOD review, we like to take some time in between games. So maybe you play 3 games and then you play 3 more, then you go back to like that third game and review that one instead of don't just like get out of that game and instantly VOD review it because then again, you don't have that much time to think and you just play that game. So you're just going to be thinking the same way that of how you were in the game. So if you don't have a ton of time for VOD review, just check on the goals. We like to usually look at like 30 seconds before, because in Rocket League, there's usually a lot of buildup. So like something that might not feel that important, where like you missed a 50 or something might actually lead to the goal. And it's important while you're VOD reviewing to look for those patterns inside the VOD review. So if you see the same thing happening over and over, that's something that maybe you want to look at and correct. If you see like one mess up in the game that costs a goal, but you don't see it in like 7 VOD reviews, that's probably not something that you should prioritize to fix. So as far as YouTubers and content creators go, pros and freestylers, their content can be fun to watch. It's not very informative, and it makes you go for things that you can't hit. So as far as pros and freestylers go, I don't love to have players watch these people. It can be fun to watch. It's entertaining to see how the top performers do it, but a lot of them just aren't great at like explaining how their or what their thought process is, because they've been that high for so long that it's harder for them to explain to a lower level player like what they're actually thinking. So I like to tend to tell people to watch the lower ranked SSLs. So why I have them watch that is they've learned the mechanics more recently. So they have a better understanding of like what people are struggling with, different things that might help players to get better. And they see common mistakes people make and how to fix them. So it's just easier for them to explain how to actually improve at those certain mechanics. So here's a few of the content creators. On the right, we have Spook Luke. He's I think he has hit SSL, but he's better for like the mid diamond and lower. He shows how to get rank higher. He doesn't show fancy mechanics that you don't need to know in that rank. So he's one of those guys that he sticks to the basics. He doesn't go too into detail about like going for flip resets. He's all about 50s and rotations. So he's a real good one to look up if you're just trying to improve at the lower ranks. Then you have the Navic. He's good for like mid diamond and above. He has longer form content talking about specific mechanics and how to get better at them. And then you have Tenacity, GC2 and above. He more recently hit SSL and gives good advice on how to improve. So he's one that you might see more flashy mechanics out of him, but he also hasn't been SSL for very long. So he still has a good understanding of like how to improve at those types of mechanics. So as far as your guys' questions go, these are some of the questions that you guys posted to Cole earlier. So we're just going to go through a few of these. So what's the best way to motivate your high school team to grind the game? I think Cole's going to take this one.
Yeah. As we get into the Q&A section here, if you have things that have popped up, feel free to start tossing those in chat. Before I answer this one, I do want to back up. I know Sean had posted a question earlier. Is it good to keep your drift the same as your directional air roll? So what do you think of that?
So as far as directional arrow, this is actually something that I also have. It's not the best. So if you are able to still change it, that's a great thing to change. It's best to have on your free arrow as far as with your drift, just because if you have it like, so I have mine bound to my arrow left, then that limits like if I try to wave dash to the right while also holding, your timing on that can get kind of off on that. So it's probably better to change that if you can, but it's not the worst thing. There also is a way to bind drift to multiple buttons, but you have to go into the code, and then any time that the game updates, you have to redo that every time, which is kind of annoying. So hopefully
Um,
that's helpful.
Perfect. Yeah, so if you have fresh questions, go ahead and toss those in. Otherwise, we'll go through a few of the ones that were submitted in advance. This is a great question. It's one I get very often, even within our own teams, like, man, I feel like, this teammate or our team as a whole could get so much better. We'd be a better team if people would just play the game a bit more. This is an ultimate and never-ending issue. If you are the most motivated, the most grindy player on your game, you will often feel the desire for your teammates to grind and play more. So a couple things with this. Number one, you have to understand that everyone has their own level of internal drive and motivation and will naturally select for themselves how much they're willing to put into the game and how many other areas of life they're willing to sacrifice or cut back on in order to grind. So the best thing that you can do as a motivated player who would like to try to get their teammates to play a bit more is to not push them to play more, but bring them along with you, right? So what do I mean by that? Like, hey, what are you doing, right? You're playing at a certain time, you're watching certain content creators, you're doing certain training packs. Invite them to join you in that, right? Presumably, most of you communicate with your teammates outside of your in-person practices. If you watched a great guide or great video, send that to them. Like, hey guys, I watched this last night. Would love to hear your thoughts on it tomorrow at practice or next weekend or after the weekend at practice, right? Or if you're gonna hop on to play, even if you're just gonna jump in and play free play, right? Message your teammates, hey guys, I'm gonna play free play for 30, 40 minutes just to grab my mechanics. Anybody want to hop in Discord, just hang out and grind some free play, right? Or maybe you're not even gonna talk that much, but just trying to invite and bring people alongside you will be a lot more attractive to your teammates than trying to push them to do certain things. And at the end of the day, just accept that you can try to motivate, you can try to bring them alongside, and ultimately you can't control your teammates, right? So your teammates are just going to have to make their own decisions, and ultimately you'll have to kind of live with that. You do your best to motivate, but you can't completely control it. All right, you can go ahead and I don't know if you should be able to see the chat there, Clayton. So let's take Aiden's question and then we'll go on to some more of the submitted ones.
Yeah. So Aiden here just posted what should I do if I'm GC and my teammates are golds and plats who have no higher level game sense? So this is real important, and you're probably gonna see this quite a bit of like teammates that are lower than you, you're the best on the team by a long shot. The best advice that I can have for you is don't try to play to the level of speed that you're at, like as far as your rotations go. Because if you're playing too fast, you're just gonna kind of bump into them, and then you're gonna be double committing on them because they're taking a little bit too long. So the best advice that I can have for you is just like obviously in your head, just like you should just be uh focusing on playing defense as far as like the whole game goes. Because like eventually goals will open up and just like take longer shots, try to give them a bit more space, a bit more time to think, because it's gonna take them longer to like think about what they want to do in their gameplay. So especially at first, and as far as games go, as long as you're focusing on defense, it's like obviously try to maintain a little bit of pressure up top, but as far as like getting on, so if you're on the opponent side of the field, try to not like lose less than 20 boosts so that you have time to recover, because they're going to need that extra time to for you to like back them up in that kind of sense.
Yeah, at the beginning of our season, we had a bit of this where we had one player who came in who was SSL top 100, very very good, very fast. Um, and even during our camp this summer, we had a similar situation where there was a bit of a gap, and we asked the question, right? Like, what's better, right? You creating 15 opportunities for your gold teammates to take shots, or you taking the shot on the 3 opportunities that your teammates and you create, right? So playing that more defensive side of things allows you to lock down your goal and then allows you to take advantage of those opportunities when they arise. So we'll do Sully's question. What should I do if it's like what Aiden said, but flipped around because I'm plat and one of my teammates is GC3? Great question. So what's the flip side of that then?
Yeah. So the flip side of that is like what I would tell you is like don't be afraid to do anything. Like as far as you're not as far as you as long as you're not hesitating on stuff, that's going to be like your biggest thing. That's what I told one of our players this season. Like the whole time he was playing real timid. He wasn't going for stuff that like I knew he could hit. He was just scared to like mess up for his team, and like he felt a lot of pressure because like it is a lot of pressure when you have teammates that are better than you and it's clear that they're better than you. But as far as like you just got to ignore that, play overconfident, go for stuff that maybe you can't even hit. Because like most of the time, as long as you get up, it's going to give that GC3 time to make a play. He's going to know how you play. He's going to know what you can and can't hit. So he's going to expect it. If you go up for something that maybe you're not super comfortable, he'll probably play back. He'll probably wait. Maybe you fake the other team out, give him space. So as long as you're not hesitating on stuff, just like keep going, try to play as fast as you can. That's probably the best thing that you can do as far as a good teammate goes.
Perfect. We'll go through the next slide question, and then we'll come back and we'll do Aiden Payne's question.
Yeah. So how to translate mechanics into better game. So as far as like, don't be afraid to try new things, especially in ranked, like when you're not in your competitive games. You can even go into casual and just try new things. A lot of the times stuff might not work out, but as long as you're trying new things, you'll learn different stuff. And then along with that, work on different setups for that mechanic because obviously you're not going to get the perfect setup every single time as far as like being able to air dribble. I have a lot of people that are like, oh, I can flip reset in free play, but all of a sudden I get into a game and I feel like I just never have time for it. That's usually because you're not getting good at like those weird, awkward setups to get the flip reset or go for an air dribble and different stuff like that. So then do we want to circle to Aiden's questions?
Yep, that'd be good.
I try to get my teammates that are lower than me to shoot shots and stay mid and play defense, but they stay back even after games. I ask them why they stood back. What's the better response? So as far as like getting them to go up, a lot of times I'll tell players to like as soon as you're behind them, or even if you're not quite behind them, just tell them you're behind them like overly early so that they have to push up. Or like even in game, you're just like, I'm behind you. I'm back post. You can go like that kind of stuff. Eventually they should start. If they're still not, then that's when you kind of got to just start cutting. If as far as like you got to have somebody putting pressure on the person with the ball.
And that might be one of those situations too where it might take sitting them down, looking at a replay, pulling it up and going, look, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Because if you give that kind of feedback mid-game to players, they might say, okay, like they recognize it. But because of all of the pressure of what's actually happening in the mid game, right? They don't fully internalize it. They don't fully digest it. So I really recommend if you feel like you're giving feedback that isn't being implemented, look at how you're giving the feedback or when you're giving the feedback, right? Is it in a more controlled environment where it can be made exceptionally clear? Or is it in the moment? Because we've seen that a lot too, where it's like, man, we've talked about this so many times, and I'll ask my player, well, when are you talking about it? Right? Just every game, every team, every year, I have this conversation with a handful of our players, and inevitably, I ask, hey, did you sit down and have a conversation with them, or is this in the middle of a match? Well, I was in the middle of a match. Okay, right? So take the opportunity to have the best conversation you can so that your teammates can actually use what you're trying to help them. All
Yeah.
right.
So Sean
Yeah, go ahead.
posted here and he was asking if anybody was trying to queue threes because he was C3, Div 4 last season. Now he's C1. So this is an important thing to just remember at like the beginning of the season. So everybody that's GC1 and higher, all those players get dropped down to GC1 right at the beginning of the season, no matter their rank, and that slowly drips down into the lower ranks. So obviously don't get frustrated because like most of the C1s and stuff right now probably were C3 last season. So I might be playing in like a GC2 lobby, but half the team is SSL. Like it's one of those things not to get frustrated at the beginning of the season. Like, oh, I was way higher last season. Now all of a sudden I'm playing and I'm three ranks lower. It's one of those things that's like it's gonna happen at the beginning of the season, especially when you get into those higher ranks. And then as far as how you should play when you're solo queuing, usually I tell people like you should always try to be third man, especially at the beginning. Most people when they're solo queuing are just going for like the clips, going for the shots. Almost everybody has the skill to score in that game, more than likely. So just playing back, playing the third, trying to get a feel for the game. Obviously, if there's somebody else doing the same thing, that's when you kind of start transitioning into being a bit more offensive, and then you start being a little bit more chasey on the ball, if that makes sense. And then Michael just posted, if I play faster than my teammate and my teammate can't keep up, how fast should I play to be able to use my teammate? How do I pass and receive passes from them? Should I be playing slower or keeping my momentum? So this is kind of what we talked about earlier as far as like you might have to just slow down your play because that's just what's going to be better for the as far as the team because it's easier for you to slow down than it's going to be for them to speed up. So I usually tell them like just really focus on being third man for most of your games, and it'll give them more time. Obviously, there's gonna be times where like hopefully they're good at communicating where they're like, oh, I have no boost, and that's when like you start cutting them. But if you just keep constantly cutting them, they're never gonna get better because they're never gonna have time on the ball, and they're never gonna get like their chance to shine inside your games and build that confidence. So even if like in practice you're like, okay, I'm only going to play defense, give them a bunch of time on the ball. And then that's when you really like hype up the stuff that they're doing that's good. So like they might make a great touch mid and you got to like let them know. Like that's the time to let them know so that they feel comfortable when they are playing with you because it is a lot of pressure to play with people that are a higher rank than you. And especially if you do know that in the back of your head, that's just kind of always there.
Yeah, I think a good example of that, and again, this you guys at the high school level, you'll be playing with mixed ranks teams, right? Some guys, I'm in GC, my teammates are gold plat. Our team this fall, right? We had two guys that are in GC2 solidly. One of them, bumped into GC3 for a little bit, and one guy who was SSL peaked top 100. Even in a team where those ranks are relatively close, they're all high level players, they're all good players. Our SSL guy beginning of the season was playing too fast, was constantly cutting, not giving his teammates the space they needed. And so that wasn't causing them to make mistakes, but it was causing them to hesitate, right? It cut into their confidence of like, well, normally I would go for this, but I'm worried my better, faster teammate is going to cut because he keeps cutting. And so it broke the whole rotation and the team synergy apart. Once he figured that out, even though he was our best player, he was the one making the mistake of playing too fast and not trusting his teammates to get the job done, even though they're also good players in their own rights. So one of the things that's important to keep that in mind, right? Even in a team with multiple high level players, like the best player, best does not mean perfect. Best does not mean you're making no mistakes. And sometimes by trying to overcompensate, you will end up causing a bigger problem. So trust your teammates, especially if we're talking about right your high school teams. If we're talking about your random solo queue rank teammates, again, use what we will based on your goals to practice most effectively. But within a team that you are trying to build synergy with and play with effectively, and especially if you ideally want them to get better, give them that time and space.
Yeah, so should we keep going on these
Yeah, we'll
slideshow
keep going.
questions here? So when do I tell my team what I'm doing? So as far as this goes, should be as soon as you know or have an idea of what you know. So like maybe you're waiting on the opponents, maybe they have the ball, and you just say waiting on one touch. And then as soon as you see that the ball's hit too hard and it's over your head, boom, over my head, rotating. Like as soon as you know, that should be your first communication. Or even if you have an idea of like, hey, I'm gonna go for an air dribble, and then all of a sudden that changes, then it's like you can calm really fast. Like your first touch is bad, it's like, oh, passing middle. Like it can stuff in Rocket League changes so fast that like as long as you're calming stuff that's like helpful to your team and not just like, oh, this guy's trash. Like that's just not helpful to your team. So as far as like just keeping the comms clear and like concise, you don't have to go on these big rambles about like what you're planning on doing or like why something didn't work. Like it doesn't matter, it's already in the past. Like the game's so fast, you don't have time for that kind of stuff. So then what is a good kickoff to do? So the most important thing with kickoffs is as far as like do something that you're comfortable with. If you don't know how to speed flip, don't go for a speed flip. That's just going to cost you goals. So if you have no idea how to do a kickoff, like your main goal should just be try to hit the center of the ball. That should be the number one thing that you try to do. As far as there's like a million different kickoffs that you can do. And it's one of those things that you just got to play around with your team. Maybe you have a corner kickoff and you're trying to send it back to the side that you came from. Here's that kind. You have Spanish, you have fakes. There's a lot of videos on all this kind of stuff. So you can always look up videos, try out some new things, maybe go into some casual with your threes teammates and just try a few different things. Try to figure out what works for you guys and different stuff like that. So what should I do if my teammates don't communicate during games? So we've had a little bit of this, and like if you're the highest ranked player, it can be the easiest for you to communicate. Sometimes those players are just they're in their head, they're thinking like as fast as they possibly can because they're just not used to playing the game. So sometimes if I'm playing with like two players that are a lot lower ranked than me, sometimes I'll be the one that talks the entire game. I'll tell them each time who should be going, who's second, pass middle. Like I'm just basically narrating the entire game for them, and that works. Obviously, it'd be nicer if they would communicate, but especially like at the beginning of the season, if that's what you got to do, it's kind of what you got to do. Like it can be the easiest for the highest level player just to kind of narrate the whole game and just make things flow kind of nicely instead of just having them like trying to communicate and then they're having bad touches because of it.
I'll piggyback on that because what you said is really important there. Sometimes it might have to start that way, but ideally, you want to get to a point where your teammates are communicating. So, in that sense, if they're not saying something, it's either because they don't know what they should be saying, or because, like Coach Willinga said, they're so overwhelmed with the pace of the game and just executing on a mechanical level that they just aren't able to talk. It's kind of a weird reality of esports that sometimes you just get so in the moment of trying to execute that your brain just can't get the words out. One way you can help with that is let your teammates know, again, going back to goal setting, right? Coach William laid out a whole list of things that could be communicated. Which of those things is most important, right? Pick the one thing that you want them to communicate, right? If it's how much boost they have, right? If it's where they're at on the field, right? Pick one thing at a time and build up their communication and your own, right? Piece by piece, one piece of information at a time. So let them know, hey, this is the information I need from you most. Break it down piece by piece. It's going to take some time. It'll improve, but you can help that process by narrowing the focus rather than just saying, guys, I need us to talk more, right? It's like, hey, I need to know where you are on the field. Or I need to know if you are going to go for the ball or not, right? Pick one thing, give them a point of focus.
Then also double piggybacking on that, as far as like sometimes you just have naturally shy people inside your team. Like maybe they know what to communicate and they're just not because it's just they just feel awkward talking about it or like they don't want to comment something wrong. So like in that situation, the best thing you can do is like make them as comfortable as possible. Like you should go into practice every time and just like be really hype, be happy that they're there. Just like try to keep making them feel comfortable because eventually they will talk. I don't think we've had a player yet that just like doesn't talk at all. And like each time they slowly will grow into that. So as long as you're like don't get mad at them because that's just going to shut them down more. So just kind of jumping on that as well. I don't remember. Um, oh, here's a good one. Do you recommend practicing with any other cars besides the Octane? So this again is like a big personal preference thing. I see a lot of players that love the Octane, and then like the Fennec has the same hitbox as the Octane, but like the look is just a little bit different. So again, this is one of those things that's like do the thing that's most comfortable for you. I wouldn't recommend straying too far from like Dominus, Octane, Breakout, Fennec, like some of the main cars, maybe Batmobile every once in a while. Each car is good for different things. So like if you want a huge flick or like a big musty flick, the Breakout's probably the best to practice with that. But I wouldn't recommend switch like going into practice and using a different car every single time. I would choose one, stick with that one for a while. If you're having like off games, that's another thing that you can change besides like your camera settings. Like switch your car out, maybe you'll feel a little bit different with that. Or if you want to prioritize different stuff with certain cars, if that makes sense. And I think, yeah, so now we're on to live questions.
Okay, perfect. All right. If you've got any final questions, go ahead and toss those in. Otherwise, we'll transition back. I'll reshare my screen here. Um, and we'll kind of move towards wrapping up here. So if you got any final questions, go ahead and throw those in. That as you get ready to do that. So how do we do all that, right? We talked through a lot of questions, a lot of concepts, both broadly speaking with just esports fundamentals into the Rocket League thing. again, don't worry about the fire hose, right? Focus on the big picture. Whatever struck you, stood out to you most, whatever you noted as this is most key for me right now. Maybe there's 5 other things that I'd like to get to eventually. But right now, this is the thing for me, right? Talk with your teammates, talk with your coaches, right? Take what you've picked up today and have a discussion with them of like, hey, here's what I think is most key for us as a team collectively. Um, and come to camp, right? We're excited about what we're doing this summer. If this intrigued you, if this excited you, and you want to do more of this kind of thing, right? Get hands-on coaching from Coach Willinga, from some of our players, right? Check that out this summer. We'd love to have you here. It's a great time. You'll learn a lot. You'll have a blast. Um, it's something we love getting to do and put on. So heading out from today, I believe that is everything we have. I guess this is one other question that we do get often, right, from students. How can I get a scholarship for esports? What can I do to get scouted by coaches? Um, the best way that you can get scouted is just to reach out. Like if you've got a particular college that you're interested in, right? See if they have an esports team. If they do, find out who their coach is, send them an email, right? Reach out to them on Discord. Be professional, right? Just don't say, "Hey, what's up, man? I'm interested in playing on your team." Say, "Hey, coach, I'm so and so. I'm X ranked in Rocket League. I play for this high school. I'd love to learn more about your program and getting connected with your team." Right? Coaches like me love it when students reach out because honestly, like high school students, it's not always the easiest to find you. Yeah, you all play for high school teams, but it's not easy to figure out who's who and where they're at and who's interested. So directly reaching out is a great way to do it. Right, going to your local state tournaments and lands, right? Most of the states that you guys are coming from um, have high school esports leagues. If your school competes in that, even if your team is not playing in the championship, if you have a chance to go, generally there are college recruiters at that event. But direct reach out's one of the best ways. And the other thing I always recommend to people too, or emphasize for them, is you don't have to be, a GC2 or an SSL to get a scholarship, right? We have 3 Rocket League teams. We have teams of different ranks. I know plenty of colleges that have multiple teams, and we'll help you grow and improve. So if you're a student who is passionate, who is dependable, who is reliable, who is good in the classroom, that's another thing I emphasize for students is you want to get a scholarship and play in college, take care of stuff in the classroom because you're no good to any team in college if you can't stay eligible, right? So take care of business in all aspects of your time as a scholastic competitor, as a collegiate esports student, right? Those things are just as important. Um, okay, final wrap up questions here. What do I do if teammates don't want to play out of practice? Yeah, we talked about that a bit at the beginning of the question section, right? As far as how do you motivate players and teammates to play. Best thing you can do again is invite them into what you are doing as much as you can, right? If you're GC3 and they're gold, can you queue ranked with them? No, you can't. But can you say, "Hey, I'm hopping on. Let's get in some free play for a bit," right? Do 30 minutes of free play, just hanging out together. And then you hop into your ranked games. Maybe they hop into theirs, right? Try to motivate them, get them excited. Um, Give them very clear objectives, right? Give them clear ideas because sometimes lower ranked players can feel intimidated because they're embarrassed about their skill or they're worried about losing or showing up in a certain way. And so, right, sending them things, filtering the game down and simplifying it. Hey, here's a great video I found and watched, or something that really helped me improve as a player. And sharing that with teammates can be really helpful. But again, at the end of the day, you can't control your teammates. You can control you and you alone. And so do your best to encourage, to motivate, to make it exciting and engaging for them. And at the end of the day, accept kind of what they choose. Do your best to perform and compete. And that's one of the best things I would say about transitioning from high school to collegiate is you're more likely to have teammates who are taking it seriously, who want to grind, who want to improve, right? Who are as motivated as you are. 'Cause in high school, right, you're locked to the other students at your school, which is fine. It's a good thing. College, most of the people on this team wanted to be here, right? You don't want to be here if you're not interested in being competitive and growing as a player. So All right. I think that's gonna bring us to the end of the clinic today. We've kind of covered all that. If you have questions coming out the end of the clinic here, please feel free to contact me. You should all have my email at this point, having received the invites. Otherwise, I'm pretty easy to find on the Northwestern College Athletics website. Happy to connect further if you have questions after the clinic. I'll bounce those around to Coach Wielinga. We can get those answered. Otherwise, come to camp. Would love to see you there. Thanks for joining in today and have a great rest of your week and a wonderful Christmas break.